Hello there, I'm Greg Sadler, and I'm guessing that you probably have come across this because you've been watching some of my YouTube videos. You might be a subscriber to the channel. You might also be somebody who subscribes to one of my blogs or is connected up with me in some other way. This is a more personal video, and I'm going to start doing more and more of these. I haven't done too many of them to this point, but I'm getting a lot of really good questions and queries and expressions of interest in aspects of my story, essentially, how I got into this philosophy racket and why it is that I do what I do. And one of the questions that people have been asking me that I've been wanting to answer for quite a while, I had to do some thinking about it actually, is this. I like what you're doing, they say. How can I do that? And a lot of times the question is framed in terms of, I want to become a philosophy professor. I see what you're doing. You seem to like it a lot. How can I actually become a philosophy professor? So I'm going to start out thinking along those lines and give some advice about, well, if you wanted that to happen, what would actually have to take place at this point, this point, this point. But then I'm going to broaden it, because that's not the only way to think about what it is that we're doing here. There's a lot of potential for connecting up with people, for bringing philosophy into everyday life in a way that goes beyond academia, and that has much more to do with what philosophy was about, in the sense, not the subject matter per se, but the way philosophy was done throughout most of history. I mean, academic philosophers are kind of a new and minority thing. They've been really prevalent in the 19th and then even more in the 20th and 21st century, but people have been doing philosophy in very public and personal ways really since the dawn of time. And even when it was taught in schools, there's a lot more to the picture than academic credits or degrees or things like that. So I want to talk about that and give some advice about, you want to be a philosopher? Here's what you ought to do, according to me. So I have to give a disclaimer right off the bat. These are my views, my reflections, my assessments of it. A lot of people are not going to agree with me. I'm probably leaving a lot of stuff out because, you know, I'm one person and you tend to forget important things. But be that as it may, I'm going to try to plow through this. So let's start by thinking about academic qualifications. If your goal is to teach philosophy classes, like Intro to Philosophy, all the way up to, you know, graduate level classes, you know, seminars, say, in Plato or Aristotle or Nietzsche or people like that, you need a degree. And so this is the first thing that we should really get clear about at the start. If you want to teach in a college or a university these days, you could teach with an MA, a master's degree. It's unlikely you're going to get a chance to unless it's during your graduate studies and you're sort of on your way to the PhD, or you're what they call a ABD, an all but dissertation student who's got their MA and is currently writing their dissertation and expects to defend it probably in the first year that they get hired. Why is that? I mean, if it was 20 years ago, 50 years ago, you would see a lot of people with MAs in philosophy and not so many people with PhDs. Well, you know, the market has become saturated with a lot of newly minted PhDs out there from a lot of different programs. And so if you want to get your foot in the door, you really want to have that PhD. So that sounds kind of daunting. Let's break it down then into, you know, what would have to happen along the way. Because then it might not seem quite so you know, mountainous climb or something like that. You know, it's not going to seem like this impossible task. So the first step on the way to a PhD is a bachelor's degree, an undergraduate degree. You get that at a college or a university, and you don't necessarily have to major in philosophy, although I think that's very helpful if you want to go on to graduate work in philosophy. There's a lot of philosophy actually getting done, and I can do a whole other video about why this is the case and what it looks like. There's a lot of philosophy not being done in philosophy departments, but being done in political science departments, history departments, English departments, sociology departments, psychology departments, and a few others. And so I would say, if you're an undergraduate, you want to take a wide range of classes, and you don't necessarily need a degree in philosophy per se. As a matter of fact, at certain schools, it might not actually be worth studying philosophy because all they do is this one little narrow thing here, and you don't get much out of that. But let's say you actually do get a degree in philosophy. Myself, I actually got a degree in philosophy and in mathematics. I double majored. And I really enjoyed the math stuff because I was doing a lot of theory work that coincided with philosophy. So you get your bachelor's, and now you have to go to graduate school. And the words of advice that I would give about graduate school, and again, I could do other videos, going into these topics in greater depth some other time, so I'm just going to kind of skim them here. The two things I would say are the most important. Pick a graduate school that is as high of a tier as you can go to. Now, what do I mean by tier? There's kind of a stratified class system in academia. Shouldn't be like that, but there is. And it's not fair, and it's in many ways irrational and not evidence-based, because I got to tell you, having met a lot of people from these Ivy League schools and big state schools, and having met a lot of people from other places, talent is pretty evenly distributed. There's a slight preponderance at these higher tier schools, but there's a lot of duds at higher tier schools too, and there's a lot of people who are just sort of connected, well connected, and they got good positions. And there's a lot of brilliant people teaching at lower tier schools that could be teaching at Harvard if they knew the right people, applied at the right time, if things had worked out a bit differently for them. But if you're a graduate student, you want to go to as high a tier school as you can. And why? Because quite frankly, that has a lot to do with hiring, especially for when you first go out into the job market. That's one of the things that is part of the class system. If you go to one of these top tier universities, that prestige, that reputation attaches to you and may open a lot of doors for you. Whereas if you go to, I can tell you this from personal experience, if you go to a lower tier school, you are fighting an uphill battle, and you'll have to publish more, and you'll have to work a lot harder than somebody who came from a better connected, better prepared background in that sense. So I might be seen as being a little cynical here, but if that's the way the game is played, that's what you have to do. So go in, and if you can go to Marquette instead of going, and I'm not going to start naming low tier schools because I don't want anyone to get upset. If you can go to Marquette, go to Marquette. If you can go to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, go there. If you can go to Yale, go to Yale. If you can go and study overseas, go ahead and do that. The second thing that I think is just as important as worrying about all this connections and job worrying, business, is this. You want to look for a place that is going to teach you, is going to lead you into text, is going to help you develop, help you grow as the kind of philosopher that you want to be. So, a lot of philosophy departments are doing analytic philosophy. If that's not your thing, and it's not my thing, I'll tell you right off the bat, don't go to a place that only does that, or only has one person who's doing American philosophy or continental philosophy or something different. If you're really into the history of philosophy, like I am, there's certain schools that you should be looking at. And you don't want to look for just one professor that you want to study with. You want to go to a place where you can get some cross-infusion from different people who are teaching about the same thinkers, the same subjects and the same texts maybe even, but are approaching it from different angles. So if you're really, really into Hegel, try to find a place that actually has not just one Hegel scholar. This is kind of tough, I know, but multiple ones, or multiple people who are at least interested in that. And also you should be aware that you don't want to be too narrowly specialized going into graduate school, because your interests may change over time. So, on the way in graduate school, that's all that advice stuff. Now, what's going to happen in graduate school? If you go to graduate school, you can expect to take a lot of upper level classes, and generally you got to take 30 hours at the master's level and then another 30 hours at the PhD level. You're not really taking 30 hours per se, because some of that is master's thesis credits and some of that is dissertation credits. But you know, if you're going to do it, I would actually say take as many classes as you can possibly fit in. Don't just be satisfied with doing the bare minimum, because you're preparing yourself at a unique time that you're never going to have the chance to do again if you're going to actually be a professor. You're preparing yourself to do research and to dig into these texts, and you're doing it with somebody who's a great guide. At the master's level, you might have to take some sort of comprehensive exam. I know I did on the history of philosophy. 3 hours, a set of questions. You got to pick one from this column, one from this column, one from this column, one from this column, and expect the grading on that to be rather arbitrary. It's kind of like part of the hazing process, but it's good because it makes you work hard. It makes you dig into these texts and get certain things down cold, because you need them to be down cold for when you're going to go into the profession later on and start teaching. At the PhD level, you're going to be taking more classes, of course. You're probably going to have to take some preliminary examinations. I know I took 4. One was on metaphysics and philosophy of religion. One was on epistemology and philosophy of science. One was on what we call value fields, which would be ethics, political philosophy, and aesthetics. And the 4th one at that time was on what we called special thinker. And I picked my special thinker to be Hegel. And so how did I prepare for that? I basically memorized the phenomenology of spirit, all the different gestalten and how they took place. I made myself this gigantic map so I could keep it stuck in my head. And then I also, intensively studied parts of Hegel's Science of Logic. And then the same deal, 3.5 hours writing out these massive essays. That's good for you, though, because that means that if you can do that, for these people that are holding you to very high standards, when you get in the classroom later on, or when you're doing research on your own, you know that you have adequately prepared, that some things are almost burned into your brain. I mean, you can ask me certain questions about things I haven't read for years, and they will come back to me because I had to drill for, all this time on learning this material. Then, at the master's level, you generally have to write a thesis, and a thesis is anywhere from about 50 to 150 pages, double-spaced, of text, and you're writing on some problem or some thinker. You're trying to do some sort of fairly original contribution to the field. But you're at the master's level, so you're not doing something that's radically new, radically innovative. As it turned out with my master's thesis, I inadvertently ended up basically replicating the stuff that had already been done by Derrida in his study of Husserl's phenomenology and applying de Saussure to it, because I hadn't read the Derrida at that time. What I ended up doing was working on Husserl's passive synthesis stuff and bringing in de Saussure and raising these problems about language. And it was a good exercise, though. Very, very good to actually write that out. At the PhD level, you're going to have to write a dissertation. Now, writing a dissertation means you're basically writing a book. If I were to do things over again, I would write a totally different dissertation than what I actually did. Instead, I wrote my dissertation on this guy, Maurice Blondel. Never published it. It ended up sprawling to something like 450 pages, way too big. It's not something I'm particularly proud of looking back at, but it was a necessary discipline to go through. It took me about 3 years to research and write it. I think if I were to go back in time and do it, I would probably write one of the books that I'd always wanted to write on St. Anselm and the history of the ontological proof through the medieval period, the early modern period, the late modern period, and tracing out some things. A much more manageable project. But you learn a lot of things in the process, not just the content that you're studying, but you learn about your own capacities. You learn how to do research well, and a lot of times you have to learn this stuff by screwing up, by making dumb mistakes that then you won't make with the next thing down the line. Myself, I have to make a lot of dumb mistakes because I'm not a person who tends to listen to other people when I ought to, and so they tell me, hey, don't do that, do this instead, and I'll be like, that doesn't apply to me. I'm going to do what I want to do, and then I do it, and then I find out, there was a good reason why they said don't do that. Hopefully you're not that sort if you're actually going to go on and try to get a PhD. So that's what's involved. Now, after you get the PhD, or if you're all but dissertation, you go out on the job market and you try to get a job. And so this is the second thing I'm going to talk about. And this is kind of a downer. The job market right now for higher education is pretty bad. Part of it has to do with the economic downturn, but it's been bad for quite a while. Even during the sort of heyday stock market high days, it's not been very good compared to previous generations. I would estimate that every position I've applied for in the last 3-4 years, there are anywhere from 300 to 500 applicants. And a lot of them went to much better schools, have better contacts, may have a better publication record than I do, are working at better schools. All those are things that affect your job prospects, because those are things that a lot of people, whether they tell you they do or not, are actually looking to when they're going through those 300 applications. They want to see where you went to, who you know, who vouches for you, what you've published, and where you're currently teaching. So if you're not already currently teaching somewhere, you want to get some teaching experience. When you're a graduate student, you want to try to get teaching assistantships so that you can ultimately have your own classes and teach those, get some experience when you go on the market. It's tough to get hired, and it's a very alienating process. The profession actually makes it worse than it has to be. There's, for example, if you go to the American Philosophical Association, which is where they do a lot of the early interviews, the first stage of interviews, where they'll interview anywhere from 10 to 16 people for one job. That's usually over the Christmas holiday, so you don't get to spend time with your family, except at Christmas. And then, like the 28th, 29th, 30th, you got to be stuck somewhere like New York or Boston or Philadelphia or Atlanta. And you got to pay a lot of money for a hotel room. You got to fly out there. And then they'll have like this entire gigantic ballroom just filled up with tables, schools that are carrying on interviews, and you got to go at this time, meet with these people, and they'll ask you a whole bunch of questions. They're probably not happy that they had to skip a good portion of their break. It's very alienating, the whole process, and intimidating. But I guess I could do a video on tips on how to get through that sort of thing, because I think I get through that much better than some other people in my field. In part because a lot of times I just don't care, right? I'm somebody doesn't like me. I'm not particularly concerned about that, even when I should be. But that's, if you get past that stage, then you do the on-campus interviews. And they'll bring in 2, sometimes 4 people to do an on-campus interview. When you go, you're probably going to be observed teaching. You're going to have to do some sort of presentation. You're going to have to meet with a lot of people. And then, the whole process is one kind of big black box. Either you'll not hear anything, which means that they're probably trying to get somebody else to take the job, or they make you an offer. And I got to tell you, it's tough getting jobs. My first 2 main jobs that I've taught, and my situation was a little bit different than many other people. I taught in a maximum security prison for 6 years, teaching philosophy and religious studies classes for Ball State University. And then I had to get on the job market right away, and then my next job was at a low-tier, historically black college that was really, really struggling, Fayetteville State University. Now I'm teaching for Marist, but I'm just teaching part-time. And there's not a lot of a lot of positions open right now. I keep my eye out, but I don't want to relocate myself unless it's like the ideal job. So I'm not applying to very much stuff currently. If you get a PhD in philosophy and you want to work in the field, you're going to have to be willing to apply all over the place. So you might have to teach someplace that's very far removed from where you currently are, just because of the way the market is currently. You get a bit more leverage the more people that you know, the better place that you're teaching, the more experience you have, the more that you publish, the more central or important your publications are. That gives you a bit more leverage. There's other things that can give you a bit more leverage too. You know, doing administrative work is a really smart job, because that you know, shows that you have a sort of flexibility. There's other things too. I mean, you want to devote a lot of time to being a good teacher, because most of the places that are hiring are not hiring you to do this top tier research, you know, just focused on Aristotle and the problem of this or that. They're hiring you to teach a whole bunch of service classes. That's probably enough about that. So like I said, you know, that's a bit of a downer. Now let's talk about stuff that I think is a bit more fun and should make you a bit more optimistic. Do you actually need a degree in philosophy? Do you need to go to university and pump in all these years and you know, write a master's thesis and write a PhD in order to make philosophy a central part of your life and engage with others in philosophy and perhaps even do some teaching? No, absolutely not. I mean, look at what's going on right now. I'm talking to you through the medium of this flip cam. Now, that flip cam is over there and this flip cam is here, but I mean, this is a $70 or $100 piece of technology. The tripod costs another 10 bucks at Staples, and you have to have a computer to hook it up to, granted, but you know, most people have computers these days, and video software isn't very difficult to get your hands on. And if you want to talk philosophy, well, you can do it through this sort of thing. Do it through YouTube. I mean, just go and look at some of the comments on some of my videos. We sometimes get these really deep philosophical conversations going on. If somebody asks a great question and I want to make a video response, kind of like I'm doing right now, that's available to me. Google now has these Hangouts where you can actually, you know, Skype, you could do this before, but now, you know, Google has these Hangouts where you can share data with each other, and you can talk about something, and you've got all these different people on video at the same time. It's like a classroom. Google actually now has online classes. I've just started exploring this, but they have online classes that you can actually create and then teach. Not for credit, of course, but you know, credit is not the most important thing in the world. If what you're really interested in is studying philosophy because it's something that's worthwhile, it brings value to your own existence, you like it, you have a passion for it, you don't have to do it in a university or a college. You can do it online. You can do it by finding the people who are willing to do that sort of work, and you can become that sort of person. You know, I got to say, when it comes down to it, a lot of the study that I did that goes into the kind of work that I do and what I know and what I'm passionate about, that didn't happen through my graduate study, let alone my undergraduate. I was a screw-up as an undergrad. I spent more time drinking and chasing women and you know, gallivanting around doing all sorts of crazy things and, you know, playing bass and stuff like that than I did studying. And I really read whatever I wanted to read rather than just what the professor assigned. But in graduate school I buckled down, but even what I learned in grad school, that's just a small portion of what it is that I decided I wanted to learn on my own. You can do that too. And there's all these great resources out there. One of the ones I've been experimenting with lately that I think shows a lot of potential is Learnist. And you can create courses, and you can connect it up with material that's available on the net. Anybody can do it because I think they're out of beta now. So if you want to teach philosophy, I would say you can do that without having a PhD. You might not get as many people necessarily coming to you, but I don't know that even having a PhD, unless you have like a name or a reputation, helps you out too much with that. You have to generate quality content. You have to give other people something that improves their life, that helps them understand their issues, or helps them understand this philosopher in this text, that entertains them to some degree, that they find compelling. And if you do that, people are going to watch you. Or if you're, say, blogging, if you want to do a philosophy blog, start one up. Blogger's available, WordPress is available. I know there's a lot of other ones. I encourage everybody who wants to do this sort of work with taking philosophy and making it more accessible to other people, and saying what you think about it, and telling people what excites you about this text or this thinker, and exploring examples, all that sort of stuff. You want to do that? Go ahead and do it. If you're watching this, you probably have a YouTube account. Get yourself a flip cam and a tripod and start shooting some videos. And don't expect it to be great from the start. If you look at some of my earlier videos, I don't like them very much at all. Sometimes the camera is shaky, or they end too early because I forgot to charge it fully. But my point here, I guess I'm rambling a little bit. My point here is, if you want to do this kind of work, if you want to get into this racket, use the educational technology and the social media networking stuff that's out there, and just start doing it. I'm totally surprised at how much this could take off. I have to credit my wife too. My wife was one of these people who said, if you build it, they will come. And I was very skeptical about the idea of putting videos up on YouTube or starting a blog or any of that sort of stuff. Who's going to be interested in this? You don't know until you actually put it out there. So, go ahead and do that. And if you want to go to university and study philosophy and get a PhD, go ahead and do that. But if you want to read philosophy on your own, in your own home, there's nothing to prevent you from buying the same books. And if you want to study Epictetus, you can read Epictetus. And if you want to learn how to read Epictetus in Greek, you can learn how to read Greek, and then you can get yourself one of these Loeb Classic that has the Greek and the English on facing pages. So that way, if you can't figure out sometimes what's being said over here, you look over here for a little clue. But my point is, this is within everybody's reach. If you really have a passion for philosophy, if you really want to do it, then nothing's stopping you other than time and resources and juggling priorities. So the fourth thing I want to say is, if you're going to study philosophy, if you're already studying philosophy, and you want to teach it to other people, here's what I think is really necessary. Having a degree, that's not really necessary. Having intellectual curiosity, having a hunger for knowledge, having that sort of attitude of nothing philosophical, nothing valuable is alien to me. That you want to know, you want to find out what different people have thought, you want to engage them, you want, after you've read one text, you want to read the next text. If you have that kind of desire, that's going to carry you a very long way. That's the kind of desire that we professors love to see in students, because I think that's kind of a sign that, hey, that person, they're kind of like me. I mean, we get into this racket, at least those of us who love what we do, because it lets us read books and commune with the great ancient and medieval and modern thinkers for a living, to get paid to actually talk to people about Aristotle and Plato. I mean, how cool is that? So you need that intellectual curiosity. You also need some training. You know, before you want, I always tell my students, before you tell me about your opinions, tell me what Aristotle thought, because Aristotle probably is smarter than either one of us, and I'd kind of like to hear about what he has to say before I hear your shtick. And then, you know, see if your shtick actually lines up with his, or, you know, if you disagree with him, tell me why, and have some reasons. If you want to do philosophy well, this is one of my beefs actually with analytic philosophy. I think there's no substitute for actually studying a wide range of thinkers across the ages who comprise what we can call the canon of philosophy. You have to read Plato. You have to read Aristotle. You have to read Augustine. You have to read Thomas Aquinas. You have to read Thomas Hobbes. And we can keep going on from there. And if you're not willing to do that, you know, if you say, I only want to focus on Nietzsche, well, you know, hey, Nietzsche spent a lot of time studying Aristotle and Plato and Kant and all these other people before he started writing his own stuff. So if you really want to understand Nietzsche and you want to get all the references to what he's talking about and you want to be able to evaluate it, you got to read the people he read. There's no way around it. You know, you don't want to specialize in this tiny little niche here and say, I'm only going to read, you know, these thinkers who are only talking to each other and only reading each other. Because that's like being in a clique. I mean, this entire vast world of philosophy is opened up to you. It's free on the web. I mean, if you want to read Kierkegaard, you can find him online. If you want to read Plato, you can find him online. If you want to read St. Anselm, hey, go to Jasper Hopkins' website where he's got his own translations in PDF form, these beautiful little, you know, book things for free. If you want to know what people think about this, Google it, and you know, blogs and YouTube videos and other things, all these sort of resources will pop up. You can study what you want to study. So it's important to engage ideas, but it's important to engage thinkers and texts. There are certain things that you should keep going back to. I mean, I'm still teaching the Republic semester after semester, and I'm still finding stuff in there that I missed the last time. And I've been reading that book for over 20 years. And I can say the same thing about a lot of other texts as well. You also want, this is another tip, you want to find ways to connect philosophy up with your own life. Now, you don't want to just study things that have to do with you and your own life. You want to instead, you know, read the philosophy and then bring your own life into connect with it. Make your own life grow. You don't want to just start out, okay, these are my little narrow conceptions and here's my life. And now that one over there, that ties in with this, so I'm going to read that one and pay attention to it. You don't want to do that. You want your life to grow. You want your personality to expand, to prosper, to flourish, right? So what you want to do is when you're reading Plato, you want to try to see the world the way Plato does. Not so that you can become a convert and now, you know, everything, you know, is viewed through Plato-colored glasses or something like that, but so that you can try on intellectually and imaginatively, even experientially, what it was that this guy was about, what it was that drove him to write this stuff down, what it was that he shared with us. Same thing for Aristotle, same thing for Epictetus, same thing for Kant, for Nietzsche, for Hegel, for, you know, Jean-Paul Sartre, for all these different thinkers. You want to connect it up with your own life. The last thing I'm going to say, and this is really a fruit of my own bitter experience, don't be too concerned with originality. I'm going to say that again. Don't be too concerned with originality. You don't have to do something radically new that nobody else has ever done before. You don't have the pressure to come up with your own philosophy of life to be the next great star or something like that. It's enough to actually understand just what the hell Plato was saying. That's valuable by itself. That's an achievement. That's something worthwhile. If you do that and you understand what Aristotle happened to say, that's two big achievements. Now you add in Epictetus or Cicero, or, you know, pick whoever you like. These are great things to do. you don't actually have to come up with something radically original in order for what you do to be valuable. The stuff that you're studying, if you're studying philosophy, is inherently worthwhile. Getting into these ideas is like entering into a cathedral. You don't need to build another cathedral. One is good enough. Explore that. See what's in there. And then talk with other people about that. I don't aim to do... I originally got caught in that originality trap. That's kind of funny. And it produced a lot of anxiety and even something like a depression on my part when I was a graduate student. And I got through it in part because I got thrown into teaching and just, hit the ground running and couldn't look back for quite a while. And it took me learning experientially that going into these thinkers and texts by itself is going to make me happy. Mastering what Anselm said about this, exploring what Thomas Aquinas is doing over here, figuring out what the hell, Heidegger or Hegel or Husserl or pick whoever you like is talking about. That's going to make me pretty happy. I'm going to be in touch with something. I had to learn that the hard way. I had to learn that by years and years of experience. So what I would say to you is just skip ahead. Be okay with figuring out what Marcuse or Adorno or Derrida is saying, or what Leibniz is saying, and digging into it and trying to unpack it and figure out its structure and its purpose. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's enough people out there trying to do that. All you have to do is get some things down, and then you can talk about them with other people. I think there's a lot more people that are interested to hear what I have to say about what Plato's saying than what I have to say as Gregory Sadler. That makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. Plato's a much smarter guy who had, contributed a lot more than I, am likely to do. So, what I'm saying here really boils down to cultivate a sense of humility. Originality, the need to be original, is really a form of intellectual pride, I would say. And it's self-destructive. Humility is, it's very fulfilling. Getting to hang out with Plato for a while, and then hang out with other people who like Plato, and expand on, well, what would Plato have said if he ran into this? That's fun. That's engaging. That's exciting. And again, to come back to the whole thing that ties it all together, this is what you can do. So if you're asking me the question, hey, I would like to do what you do, I'm sharing with you a little bit about how I got to where I am and what it is that I do. What I do is read philosophy and talk about it with people, and hopefully get them to see what's going on over there, not with me, but what's going on over there with the texts, with the thinkers, and how it might improve their own lives. So is there anything that would keep you from being able to do that? No. And is not having a degree a barrier to that? Does that fence you out? Absolutely not, because you can use the technology that's there to engage with other people. And so I encourage all of you who have an interest in doing that to do precisely that. I would love to see tons of YouTube channels with not necessarily professionals, but just amateurs, in the sense of people who love what they're doing, talking philosophy.